They left the bull to die in the rain. Then a boy with a scarred face showed up. The rusted cattle trailer creaked in the wind, its back gate swaying open with a mournful screech. Rain drummed against the metal roof in steady, relentless bursts, dripping down through cracks and pooling in muddy trenches around the wheels. Inside, barely moving, was an old bull. His coat was dull and matted with grime, his massive body sunken from neglect. The rain poured across his rib cage like it was washing over old bones. One of his eyes, crusted at the corners, blinked slowly at the gray sky beyond the trailer's opening. His name, Harker, was seared into his hide with a crooked H, though the mark was half faded from age and weather. He hadn't eaten in days. His front legs were curled under him, and his back legs stretched out as if he had fallen and couldn't find the strength to rise again. A few black flies buzzed lazily around his ears, drawn to the crust of dried blood near his nostrils. From a distance, he looked dead. Jesse Ray saw the bull for the first time through a veil of rain, standing on the far side of the fence line in soaked sneakers. He didn't move for a long while, his hands tightening around the wire. The scar along the left side of his face glistened in the rain like a lightning strike carved into skin, stretching from his ear to the corner of his mouth, pulling his lips slightly downward into a permanent half-frown. He was 14, but the storm in his eyes made him look older, or maybe just tired. He ducked beneath the lowest wire and stepped into the pasture, the mud clinging to his ankles like wet hands trying to drag him down. His hoodie sagged with water, the sleeves flapping around his thin wrists. The wind howled low over the empty fields, and the trailer groaned like a ghost trapped in metal. Jesse crept closer. One wrong noise and the bull might spook, if it was even alive. Up close, the animal looked worse. His fur was patchy and pulled tight over sharp bones. His hooves were cracked. Flies had made homes in the folds of his eyelids. Jesse crouched just outside the gate and whispered, "Hey! Hey, big guy! You still in there?" He didn't expect a response, but after a few seconds, the bull's ear twitched. Barely. Jesse leaned in, his breath fogging in the cold air. That small sign, just that one twitch, was enough to make him stay. He ran back toward the tree line where he'd been hiding the last few nights, ducked into the crumbling old barn, and grabbed the plastic bucket he'd found beside a broken wheelbarrow. He filled it with rainwater from a rusted drum and carried it back, dragging it through the mud with both hands. He reached the trailer again just after dark. The bull hadn't moved. Jesse pushed the bucket inside with his foot, then backed away. "If you're thirsty, it's there," he murmured, his voice trembling from cold and something else, uncertainty maybe, or hope. He stayed until midnight, watching from the shadows. Harker never lifted his head. The next night, Jesse returned with feed, half a sack of crushed grain he'd taken from the old silo. He crept through the pasture again, ignoring the wind and the sting in his feet. When he pushed the feed bucket inside, the bull shifted. His head didn't rise all the way, but he turned toward the food. Jesse let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "That's right," he whispered. "I knew you weren't done." He kept coming back. Every day, every night, rain or cold or fog, it didn't matter. He pulled ticks from Harker's hide with gloved hands. He whispered stories from the foster home, about the kids who hurt him, the ones who stared, and the ones who didn't speak at all. He found medicine in the tack room, something he thought was for infections, and sprinkled it into the feed. He didn't know exactly what he was doing, but he knew what it meant to be left behind. He wasn't going to leave this bull. From his room at the main ranch house, Wade Darnell didn't notice the boy. He was too busy with prep for the livestock auction. His father had been barking orders all week. Wade was 17, tall and strong-jawed like someone who thought their own reflection deserved a round of applause. He strutted around the pens, cracking jokes, barking at workers, and throwing rocks at fence posts like it proved something. The ranch wasn't doing well, everyone knew it, but Wade believed that if he looked confident enough, maybe the ranch wouldn't fold under him. He had forgotten all about Harker. Everyone had. The bull had gone down during the last storm, and no one thought it worth the money or time to pull him back up. He was old, a has-been. Let the rain do the job. That's what Wade's father, Mr. Darnell, had said, but Harker hadn't died, and Jesse hadn't stopped coming. A week passed, and the bull started moving more, first shifting his weight, then lifting his head higher, then rising to his knees. His eyes, once foggy, began to track Jesse when he entered the pasture. Jesse smiled more now, quiet, cautious smiles, the kind that didn't last long but meant something. Then one morning, just after sunrise, Wade rode his ATV down to check the lower fences. From the corner of his eye, he spotted movement in the trailer. He slowed, squinted. There, kneeling in the mud, was a skinny boy wiping the bull's face with his sleeve. Wade cut the engine and stomped toward them. "Hey!" he barked, voice cutting through the wet air like a whip. "Hey! What do you think you're doing?" Jesse didn't flinch. He stood slowly, muddy from head to toe, one hand still resting on the bull's shoulder. Rain dripped from the brim of his hood. "He needs help," Jesse said quietly. "He's not ready to die." Wade's lip curled into a sneer as he got a better look at the boy's face. The scar twisted his expression in a way that made Wade immediately uncomfortable. "You're from town, aren't you? One of those group home freaks?" He glanced down at the bull. "That thing's not worth a cent. You trying to play vet out here? He's trash." Jesse didn't answer, his jaw locked tight. The bull shifted beside him, a low grunt rising from its throat. Wade stepped closer. "Go on, get lost, before I call someone." Then, as if to prove he meant business, he lifted his foot, aiming to kick the animal's side. The sound that came next wasn't loud, but it stopped Wade cold. A growl. Low, guttural, fierce. The bull's head jerked slightly, nostrils flaring. Harker's eyes locked on Wade with startling clarity. Jesse didn't move. His voice was calm, quiet, almost like a warning to both of them. "He's not ready to die." The first shove came without warning. Jesse barely had time to register the sound of boots behind him before he was on the ground, face first in cold, sticky mud. The bucket he had just filled rolled away, sloshing water down the hill. Wade Darnell stood over him, arms crossed, raincoat unzipped and flapping like a cape in the wind. His face twisted in a smug grin. Behind him were two boys, Colby and Trent, ranch hands who'd do anything Wade asked, especially if it meant pushing someone smaller into the dirt. Neither said a word. They just laughed. "You don't belong here," Wade said coldly, nudging the bucket with his boot. It flipped over, spilling the last of the water. "Thought I told you that already." Jesse pushed himself up with one hand, wincing as his ribs protested. His hoodie clung to his frame, soaked through. He didn't say anything. Not yet. "You deaf now?" Wade asked, stepping closer. "I said leave. Or do you want me to call the sheriff and let him take care of you?" Jesse wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His lip was bleeding. The corner where the scar met skin had split again. Still, he didn't budge. His eyes didn't even flicker. "You think you're special?" Wade continued. "That bull's not yours. He's property. And property doesn't belong to runaways." Jesse glanced at the nearby silo, then at the path back to the trailer. The mud was thicker now, the storm picking up again. Behind Wade, Colby kicked the bucket away, sending it clanging down the slope. "You got nothing to say now?" Wade asked, his voice rising. "Good. Keep it that way." Jesse met his eyes, calm, steady. And in that silence, something in Wade flinched, just for a second, before he turned and walked off with the others. Their laughter echoed across the fields. That night, the storm came back in full force. Wind howled through the barn rafters. Rain lashed against the metal walls of the trailer like it was trying to peel them away. Jesse limped through the pasture, one hand clutching his ribs, his breath coming in sharp, cold bursts. Thunder cracked above as he reached the trailer and pulled himself inside. Harker lay curled in the straw, unmoving, but not lifeless. His chest still rose and fell. Jesse dropped beside him, breathing hard. He reached out and pressed his forehead to the bull's side, listening to the slow beat of a heart still fighting. "I'm not going anywhere," Jesse whispered. "Not without you." He stayed curled beside Harker for hours, feeling the cold in his bones. Somewhere between the thunder and the pain in his side, Jesse drifted off. Morning came in sudden brightness. It was a thudding sound that woke him. Hooves, not in the distance, close, inside. Jesse blinked awake, rubbing the crust from his eyes, unsure if he was dreaming. But when he looked up, his breath caught in his throat. Harker was standing, not strong, not proud, but standing. The bull's legs trembled under him. His head dipped low, swaying slightly with the effort, but he was up. For the first time in weeks, the giant had risen. Jesse didn't move for several seconds. Then, slowly, he stood, his heart pounding. "You did it," he whispered. "You actually did it." He stepped closer, reaching out a hand. Harker didn't flinch. Jesse placed his palm against the bull's neck, feeling the heat of life returning beneath the skin. For the first time in a long time, Jesse smiled. By afternoon, the pasture was alive with motion. Jesse led Harker in slow, tight circles, encouraging him with soft whispers and gentle touches. The bull stumbled a few times, but never fully fell. Jesse used an old rope as a lead, teaching him to stop and start with subtle tugs. Each step was a miracle, each moment a victory. Over the next 2 days, they made progress. Jesse set up small obstacles, puddles, broken branches, and taught Harker to step over or around them. He found old feed bags and rattled them in the air, training the bull not to spook. He even started giving hand signals, open palm to stop, fingers curled to move. Slowly, Harker learned. Jesse started spending more time out in the open. He didn't care if someone saw him anymore. He was doing something real, something that mattered. But back at the main house, the Darnells were dealing with problems of their own. Inside the stable, the prized bull, Titus, lay on his side, groaning. Wade stared at him in disbelief, kicking straw toward the corner as the vet finished wrapping the leg. "Busted bad," the vet muttered, tightening the bandage. "Won't walk right again. Not in time for the auction." Mr. Darnell swore under his breath. Wade stood silent. They both knew what this meant. Without Titus, they'd lose buyers. The auction would flop. And Clearbell Ranch couldn't afford another loss. They needed another bull. Fast. That night, as the moon rose behind the clouds, Wade stepped outside to clear his head. He wandered toward the paddocks, not expecting to see anything useful. But in the distance, near the old trailer, he saw movement. He squinted. Under the moonlight, a shape was walking, slow but steady. The shape of a bull. And beside it, the boy. Wade's jaw clenched. He crouched in the shadows, watching as Harker followed Jesse's lead like a well-trained dog. The boy gestured, and the bull stopped. Another gesture, and he moved again. It made no sense. That bull was supposed to be half dead. Wade didn't wait. He turned and sprinted back to the house. The next morning, Mr. Darnell rode out to see for himself. He arrived just as Jesse was guiding Harker through another set of walking drills. The boy heard the truck engine too late. When he turned, Darnell was already stepping out of the cab. Jesse stood his ground. "This your doing?" Darnell asked, nodding toward the bull. "He was never gone," Jesse said. His fists were clenched at his sides. "You just stopped looking." Darnell studied the bull, the way he stood, the way his eyes were alert. "Auction's in 3 days," he said at last. "If he's fit to walk, he's fit to sell." Jesse stepped forward. "He's not for sale. You left him to die." Darnell's face didn't change. "He's ranch property, and the ranch decides what's useful and what's not." Then he turned and walked away, his boots squishing in the wet grass. Jesse watched him go, heart pounding. That night, Jesse didn't sleep. He stayed beside Harker, petting his thick neck, thinking. He knew Darnell would come for him, not with words, but with action. Sure enough, just after midnight, headlights crept through the fog. 2 ranch hands, men Jesse didn't recognize, stepped out with gloves and a ramp trailer. They approached the pen silently, carrying ropes and a feed bucket. Jesse was already there. "You can't take him," Jesse said, stepping between them and the gate. His voice didn't shake. "Orders are orders," one of the men muttered. "We don't want trouble." "You left him to die," Jesse said again. "I brought him back." The men didn't argue. They didn't need to. They knew the ranch made the rules. One gently pushed Jesse aside, not roughly, but firmly. Harker hesitated at first, but was coaxed into the trailer with grain. Jesse stood by the gate, breathing hard, eyes wet. But as the trailer door closed and the truck pulled away, Jesse reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small black tracker, the kind used for tagging calves. He had found it weeks ago behind the barn, broken off a collar. After some fiddling, he'd managed to get it working. He pressed the magnetized back to the trailer's hitch and let go. The truck rumbled off into the night, headlights shrinking into the mist. Jesse stood alone in the dark, soaked with rain and burning with quiet fire. But as they drove off, they didn't notice the GPS tracker Jesse had slipped under the trailer hitch. Jesse crouched behind the last row of cracked wooden bleachers, mud drying on his knees. His breath held so tightly in his chest it hurt. His eyes locked onto the pen in the center of the dusty arena, where Harker stood, tethered and trembling, flinching at every sharp crack of the handler's whip against the sand. "Come on, move!" barked the man in a red vest and thick gloves, yanking hard on the lead chain tied around Harker's neck. The bull snorted, trying to pull away, but the chain snapped tight, cutting into his hide. The handler growled and swung the whip again, not to hit, just to scare, but Harker stumbled sideways, his front leg buckling from stress. The crowd around the fence was thin, mostly workers, but Jesse felt every eye in the world on that pen. Every beat of the bull's pain thudded inside his own ribs like a hammer. He gripped the wooden beam in front of him until his knuckles turned white. The wind kicked up dust and the sun was dipping low over the horizon, bleeding gold across the stands. Jesse's jaw clenched. They don't know who he is, but I do. That night, Jesse returned under cover of darkness. The old fence that circled the pen was rusted through in places, and he slipped between the slats like a shadow. Harker stood alone in the center, his sides rising and falling in heavy, uneven breaths. The handler had left him tied, short length, just enough to pace in anxious circles but not enough to lie down. Jesse approached slowly, whispering the same calming words he'd used on the ranch. "Easy, boy. It's me." Harker's head lifted. Even in the dark, Jesse saw the recognition in the bull's eyes. He didn't spook or jerk the chain. He just exhaled and stepped forward until Jesse could place a hand on his flank. His body was hot with stress, muscles tight. Jesse ran his hand gently across the brand, the crooked H still visible under the grime and matted fur. "They think they can take you," Jesse murmured. "But they don't know who you are. I do." He stayed for a long time, head resting against the bull's shoulder until the moon had risen high and the town lights blinked out one by one. Then he slipped away just as quietly as he came, his plan forming with each step. By the next morning, Jesse was already working. He returned to the abandoned barn behind the Clearbell property and dug through the saddlebag he'd found weeks ago under a pile of moldy hay. It was cracked leather, still bearing the faint scent of smoke and old horses. Inside were old clippings, yellowed newspaper articles, auction receipts, handwritten notes in fading ink. One story caught his eye. "Fire destroys Harper Ridge Ranch. Livestock records lost." He read it 3 times. Harper Ridge. The same crooked H, the same breed of bull. It hadn't been Clearbell's mark after all. And then Jesse remembered something else. A photograph, stuck to the bottom of the bag. It was blurry, but the man in it, standing behind a group of bulls, looked a lot like a younger Darnell. The article said he had worked there years ago before the fire, before everything was gone. What if Harker had been stolen? Jesse went back to the barn, grabbed the tablet he had taken from the house last month and began compiling everything he had. Footage of the bull chained and abused in the training pen, photos of Harker during recovery, videos of Jesse guiding him through commands in the pasture. He included screenshots of the article and circled the brand. Then he found the auction brochure in a trash bin near the stables. It listed all the registered buyers. One name stood out: M. Alder, Alder Livestock, and Holdings, North State. Jesse typed up a message, attached the files, and sent it anonymously. He didn't know if it would reach the right person. He just hoped it would reach someone who cared. The reply came within hours. "Thank you. We're not attending anymore, but someone will." 3 days passed. The morning of the auction arrived like a drum roll in Jesse's chest. He had barely slept the night before, and now he stood near the edge of the Clearbell auction yard, hair washed, shirt tucked, hands sweating at his sides. He had snuck into the grooming pen earlier and scrubbed Harker down himself, brushed every inch of mud and dried sweat from his hide. The bull stood tall now, muscles filling back out, the scar tissue near his knees barely visible. His eyes were clear, steady. The lot was busy. More than 24 buyers, all men in boots and hats, milling around with clipboards, eyeing the livestock like stock charts. Darnell stood near the central pen, all smiles and firm handshakes. Wade hovered behind him, arms crossed, wearing the same smugness Jesse had come to know too well. At noon sharp, the auction began. The announcer took the mic from the haystacked platform and called out the first lot. Bulls came and went. Bidding started and stopped in waves. Jesse waited. Finally, they brought out Harker. The bull stepped into the ring, rope led taut, hooves thudding on packed dirt. His head was high, his back straight. He didn't twitch, didn't flinch. Jesse stood just beyond the rail, holding his breath. A ripple went through the crowd. "Isn't that?" one buyer murmured. "That's Harker," another whispered. "Thought he was dead." Darnell was glowing with satisfaction. "Recovered him ourselves," he said loudly, beaming like a salesman. "Bit of rehab, good stock care, and the right bloodline. You won't find another bull like him today." The announcer raised his hand. "Opening bid starts at 10,000. Do I hear 10? Jesse's pulse pounded. He scanned the crowd. No one raised a hand. Not yet. 10,000, the announcer said again. "Going once." Then a voice rang out. That bull was stolen. Silence slammed the crowd. Heads turned. Boots shifted. From the far side of the yard, a tall man in a black coat stepped forward, clean-shaven, eyes sharp beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He held a small folder in one hand. His voice was calm, but rang like iron. "That brand belongs to Harper Ridge Ranch, protected line. Registered 15 years ago under State Livestock Heritage Act." He held out the folder. "I've got the documents." The announcer blinked, stepping down from the platform. Darnell's smile cracked. "Now hold on," he began, but the man ignored him. He handed the folder directly to the auctioneer. Inside were printed copies of everything Jesse had sent: photos, breed records, ownership logs, newspaper clippings. A full timeline of Harker's history. The man turned toward Jesse. "Thanks for the heads up, kid," he said with a small nod. "You did the right thing." The auction yard emptied faster than anyone could have expected. Buyers climbed into trucks without shaking hands. Ranchers packed up their clipboards, faces tight with confusion, and whispered questions. The auctioneer stood silent at the edge of the platform, clutching the documents the tall man in the black coat had handed him, like they were burning holes through his fingers. Darnell barked orders no one followed. Wade paced in furious circles behind the paddocks, jaw locked, fists clenched. But it was over. The sale was canceled, the pens locked, and Harker was led out under quiet, official watch. By evening, word had spread past Granger County. Investigators rolled in before the sun rose the next morning. Unmarked trucks, quiet voices, clipboards, cameras. They combed through records in the Clearbell office, pulled old branding irons from the shed, and took photos of the livestock one by one. The crooked H wasn't the only questionable mark they found. In a cramped side room, Darnell and Wade sat across from two men in plain jackets who asked the same questions over and over. When had the bull arrived? Why had it been penned up so long? Who had done the branding? And what did Darnell know about Harper Ridge Ranch? Outside, Jesse stood in the shade of a cedar tree, arms crossed, watching as the last of the trailers pulled out, and the gate was locked behind them. Harker wasn't in that trailer. He was already on his way to recovery, transported earlier that morning to a veterinary reserve under state protection. He had gone without protest, calm and steady, like he knew the fight was done. Jesse hadn't spoken to Wade since the accusation dropped. They had passed each other once in the barn aisle. Wade looking smaller than usual, eyes down, mouth closed. Jesse didn't say a word. Later that day, the tall man, the same one who'd spoken out at the auction, approached Jesse behind the stables. He wasn't dressed like the investigators. His coat was still dusty from the road, and the boots on his feet were worn but cared for. There was no badge, just a calm presence that made people listen. "You helped more than you know," he said. "The paperwork you pulled up? Opened a case they closed 10 years ago." Jesse looked at the man's face, trying to understand why he didn't feel anything. He should have been proud, but all he felt was tired. I just didn't want him to be taken again, Jesse said quietly. He trusted me. The man nodded. That trust saved his life. He paused, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Jesse took it and opened it slowly. It was a letterhead. Iron Reach Animal Rescue and Rehabilitation. Beneath it, a few handwritten lines. We've got a spot open. Housing, meals, training. If you're interested, come with us. We could use a hand. Jesse looked up. You run it? He asked. I do, the man replied. Small place, out of state, quiet. Not perfect, but it's real. And there's a lot of animals that need someone like you. Jesse didn't need time to think. Yeah, he said. I want that. The man smiled. Then let's get you packed. 3 weeks later, the morning sun broke gently over a wide, green field somewhere miles away from Granger County. The air smelled like fresh grass and cool earth. Wooden fences ran across the pasture in long, clean lines. A barn stood on a small hill, red paint peeling but proud. The wind carried only birdsong and the soft shuffle of hooves. Jesse stood by the gate, arms resting on the top rail, watching as Harker grazed beneath the open sky. No chains held him now. No trailer, no pen. The bull looked healthy again, strong but not just in body. There was something steady in the way he moved, something quiet and sure. His coat shimmered under the light and the crooked H was still there, etched into his side. But now it meant something else. It didn't speak of ownership or loss. It spoke of survival, of second chances. Jesse reached up and touched the side of his own face. The scar was still there, jagged from his ear to his lip, unchanged. But it didn't burn anymore. It didn't weigh him down. It didn't define him. He thought of the night he first saw Harker in that trailer, broken and forgotten. He thought of the nights he had sat beside him, whispering in the dark, willing him to rise. He thought of the chain, the whip, the fight, and the day the crowd had turned silent. He thought of what it felt like to be seen, finally seen, not for the scar, but for what he'd done. Behind him, the man from the auction, his name was Roan, stepped out of the barn, a clipboard in hand. You good out here? He called. Jesse nodded. Yeah, just watching him. Roan walked up beside him. He's settling in well. You've got away with him. Jesse didn't answer right away. He just looked out across the field, then smiled. I guess we saved each other, he said. Roan chuckled, then turned back toward the barn. Lunch in 15, he said over his shoulder. Don't let him eat all the clover. Jesse stayed by the fence a little longer. In the distance, Harker raised his head. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world felt perfectly still. The sun warmed Jesse's shoulders. The wind tugged gently at his sleeves. He breathed in deep. He had no idea what came next, but he wasn't scared. He had built something real. He had protected something that others had thrown away. And in doing so, he had stitched himself back together. As Harker turned to wander deeper into the pasture, Jesse stepped back from the fence, hands in his pockets, shoulders loose. And from that day forward, no one ever looked at the boy with the scarred face the same way again.